At the beginning of the film, we meet a prisoner named Wang Yuan-Yung. While in the prison bathroom, he gets jumped by several inmates at once. But against all expectations, Yuan-Yung beats every one of them down. From that moment on, no one in that dark prison dares to mess with him again. After serving 20 long years behind bars, Yuan-Yung finally breathes free air again. Once he is released, his belongings are returned to him, and as he walks out of prison, he keeps thinking about a locket with a woman's photo inside it. That small keepsake brings back horrifying memories from his past. As evening falls, Yuan-Yung wanders through the city, staring at women passing by with an unsettling look in his eyes. Then around midnight, when the streets have gone quiet, he notices a poster of a famous musician named Han Sui. He pauses for a moment, then makes his way to Han Sui's house, as if the place reminds him of a girl from 20 years ago, back before he was sent to prison. After that, he returns to the city and violently tears into Han Sui's poster, making it clear that he is carrying a deep grudge against the musician. This is where the story begins. This is nightfall. Sometime later, Yuan-Yung manages to get a job as a technician at a music shop. While working there, he hears a beautiful melody being played by a young woman. The moment he sees her sad but beautiful face, he starts to cry, as if he is overwhelmed by what he sees in her. Not long after, the phone rings, and the girl, whose name is Zoe, quickly gets ready to leave. Outside, she is picked up by her father, and to Yuan-Yung's shock, that man turns out to be Han Sui, the famous musician himself. It soon becomes clear that Han Sui is an extremely overprotective father. He scolds Zoe constantly, even when she is only a few minutes late. At one point, one of her college friends, a young man named Wei Li, greets her, and that brief interaction is enough to make Han Sui instantly jealous. The two of them head home, completely unaware that Yuan-Yung is following behind. That night, things get even darker. Zoe is interrogated at home, while her mother, Jenny, prays quietly in another room. Han Sui demands to know what kind of relationship she has with Wei Li, the boy who spoke to her earlier. In a fit of anger, he beats her, while Jenny does not dare interfere, as if this kind of thing has become normal in that house. It is obvious that Han Sui's feelings toward Zoe are no longer just those of a protective father. There is something twisted inside him, something possessive, as though he believes Zoe belongs to him forever. In the end, Zoe can no longer take the abuse, so she is forced to promise that she will never be friends with another man again, all while holding back her tears. The next day, Yuan-Yung rents a small house close to Zoe's home. From there, he secretly watches her as she leaves for college. Then Wei Li arrives to go with her, and Yuan-Yung simply stands there in hiding, watching everything from behind the trees. That night, while Zoe is practicing piano at home, she receives a phone call from someone. Han Sui immediately gets angry, accusing her of giving their phone number to someone else, even though she is supposedly only allowed to use that phone to speak with her parents. He completely loses control and starts beating her again, but this time, Yuan-Yung sees it all through a telescope from the window of his own house. Not long after, under the cold midnight wind by the beach, someone drags a trash container carrying a body. The person brutally smashes the victim's face with a stone until it becomes unrecognizable, then dumps the body into the ocean. The story then shifts to a widowed detective named Lam and his junior partner, Angel. They are standing in an electronics store watching a television broadcast, when Lam casually tells Angel to buy a camera. A moment later, Yuan-Yung walks out of the same store and briefly crosses paths with Lam. The detective makes small talk about the news, and soon after, Yuan-Yung quickly leaves. Later at home, Lam is about to celebrate his daughter's birthday. But just as the moment begins, he receives a call reporting that a body has been found. He has no choice but to leave, which upsets his daughter since her father is always busy and rarely has time for her. Lam and the police head to the crime scene after receiving the report from a fisherman who discovered the body. When they arrive, they find that the victim is a man. His skin is badly burned, his fingerprints are gone, and his face has been completely destroyed by blunt force. It is clear that the killer wanted to make sure the victim could not be identified. Even more disturbing, a microphone has been shoved into the victim's mouth. Seeing the extent of the injuries, Lam believes the murder was driven by revenge. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, Yuan-Yung quietly watches the news report, announcing that the police have found the body. Later, he sneaks into Zoe's house and looks through photos of her from when she was a child. While inside, he secretly installs a wireless microphone. Just as he leaves, Jenny can be seen outside calmly mopping the floor in the yard. During the autopsy, the forensic doctor finds alcohol in the victim's bloodstream. However, there is no seawater or sand inside the organs, which means the victim was already dead before being thrown into the ocean. Eventually, after facial reconstruction is completed, the identity of the victim is finally confirmed. The body belongs to Han Sui, the famous musician in Hong Kong. Lam and his team soon visit Zoe's house to question her and her mother. Both of them appear strangely calm. They claim they had no idea Han Sui had died, and Zoe explains that her father often went out drinking with friends. While standing on the balcony during the investigation, Lam nearly slips. At that same moment, Yu and Young can be seen watching them from the window of his house nearby, listening carefully through the microphone he planted earlier. The police are completely confused by the situation. Then Angel arrives with new information. She reveals that one of Han Sui's former employees once had a daughter named Eva, who died 20 years ago after being assaulted and murdered by someone who broke into her home. According to the case records, the man responsible was none other than Yun Young, who has now been released from prison. Hearing this, Lam suddenly realizes that Yun Young looks very similar to the man he saw at the electronics store the day before. The following day, Zoe receives a phone call from an unknown number. The caller says nothing and only makes strange choking sounds. The unsettling call leaves Zoe feeling uneasy. Elsewhere, Lam continues discussing Eva's case. According to the old police records from 20 years ago, Yun Young had been obsessed with Eva and constantly followed her. One night, he allegedly broke into her house, assaulted her, and then murdered her in a brutal attack. And when Lam takes a closer look, he notices something else. Zoe's face looks remarkably similar to Eva's. That resemblance may explain why Yun Young has returned, and why he now seems to be developing the same dangerous obsession with Zoe. The story then moves to Zoe at her college campus, where Detective Lam and Angel arrive to question her. During their conversation, Zoe admits that her relationship with her parents has never been very good. However, she insists that her mother truly loves her father and asks Lam not to suspect her. As they talk further, Zoe learns something shocking. She had a sister named Eva who was murdered before Zoe was even born. This revelation completely confuses her, since her parents never told her anything about it. Lam advises Zoe to be careful, explaining that the killer responsible for Eva's death has already been released from prison. What they do not realize is that Yun Young is secretly listening to their entire conversation. Not long after, outside the campus, a large piece of glass suddenly falls nearby. It turns out Yun Young caused it. No one knows exactly why, but it seems like he is intentionally provoking the police to approach him. This quickly leads to a chase between him and the officers, although he manages to escape. Back at his small rented apartment, Yun Young sits quietly, listening through the hidden microphone as Zoe plays the piano. The sound of her music seems to captivate him completely. The next day at campus, Zoe finds a note that says someone will always be with her. At first, she smiles, assuming the message came from Wei Li. But when she meets him while buying food, he denies writing it. That moment makes Zoe uneasy, as if someone has been secretly watching her. Her fear grows even stronger when she notices Yun Young staring at her from across the street. Even when she returns home and tries to relax, she cannot shake the feeling that he is always nearby. The thought of him following her begins to make her paranoid. Meanwhile, something unexpected happens. Yun Young actually approaches Detective Lam himself. Lam asks if he really killed Eva 20 years ago. Yun Young simply shakes his head, revealing that he is mute. Instead, he writes a short response on a piece of paper, making it clear that he does not want to talk about it. Lam then asks if he knows that Eva's father, Han Sui, has recently died. Yun Young shakes his head again and claims that on the night of Han Sui's death, he was simply wandering around the city. Since the police have no evidence connecting him to the murder, they are forced to let him go, although they decide to continue watching him closely. Afterward, Lam and Angel visit Zoe's house again and see Jenny cleaning the floor. She calmly explains that she is just doing housework to pass the time, so she does not need to hire a maid. Lam then asks why she never told Zoe about Eva. Jenny immediately becomes defensive and questions why Lam is trying to connect her husband's death to something that happened so many years ago. Eventually, Jenny admits the truth. She cannot have children, and both Eva and Zoe were actually adopted by her husband. After Lam leaves, Yun Young continues listening to Zoe playing the piano through the hidden microphone. He seems completely absorbed by the music, almost as if Zoe is sitting right beside him, even though it is only a fantasy in his mind. Later, Lam and Angel meet at a cafe and examine Yun Young's old school records. They discover that he was once the top student in his school. According to his teachers, he was quiet, highly talented in music, and even won an Asian-level chess championship. This information reveals that Yun Young is extremely intelligent and careful. Lam still suspects him, but something does not make sense. It is hard to believe that someone this smart would act so recklessly as to assault and murder Eva. Time passes and Zoe continues her usual routine of practicing the piano. But suddenly she receives a threatening message saying that everyone close to her must die. Terrified, she immediately contacts Detective Lam. Soon after, the police begin guarding Zoe's house. Meanwhile, the police commander keeps pressuring the team to arrest Yuan Young as soon as possible, since he is currently the only suspect. The detectives begin gathering more information from a prison guard who once supervised him. According to the guard, Yuan Young never confessed to killing Ava. Years ago, he even tried to appeal his conviction, but the request was rejected. While serving his sentence, the pressure eventually broke him mentally. At one point, he attempted to take his own life using a pencil. He survived, but the incident permanently damaged the muscles in his tongue, leaving him unable to speak. The guard also explains that during all those years in prison, Yuan Young never socialized with anyone. He spent most of his time alone in his cell. From the very first day he arrived, other inmates constantly harassed and abused him. But one day, 4 prisoners attacked him in the bathroom. Yuan Young fought back so violently that all of them were left severely injured. After that incident, no one in the prison dared to bully him again. The investigation then leads Lam and Angel to one of Yuan Young's old high school friends, a photographer. He reveals something that completely contradicts the police records. According to him, Yuan Young and Ava were actually a couple who loved each other deeply. Lam initially struggles to believe it because the official police files claim that Yuan Young and Ava did not even know each other. But when the photographer shows him old photos of the two together, Lam finally begins to accept that they really were in a relationship. Because of this contradiction, Lam and Angel decide to visit the retired police officer who handled Eva's case 20 years ago. The officer explains that Yuan Young was arrested at the crime scene. CCTV footage from the yard showed him sneaking into Eva's house, and the main witness was Han Sui, Eva's father. Hearing this, Lam suddenly remembers something. Back then, he had just joined the police force and once saw young Yuan Young being beaten during interrogation at the station. But as a rookie officer at the time, Lam could only watch silently from behind the door. Later that night, Angel is startled when someone knocks on her door. When she opens it, no one is there. Suddenly, she is attacked from behind and suffocated with a plastic bag. The attacker is Yuan Young. He knocks her unconscious, takes her phone, and uses it to contact Lam. It seems like he is deliberately provoking the police. When Angel regains consciousness, she and Lam are shocked to discover that the attacker intentionally left a microphone in Angel's hand. It is the same type of microphone that was found inside Han Sui's mouth. This discovery makes the police even more convinced that Yuan Young is the one who murdered Han Sui. The next day, Lam invites Yuan Young to talk in hopes of uncovering more evidence. What Yuan Young does not realize is that the police are already preparing to arrest him at the end of a gondola ride. The commander is certain that Yuan Young killed Han Sui out of revenge. Inside the gondola, Lam shares his thoughts. He believes Yuan Young did not kill Ava because the two of them were in love. However, Lam suspects that Yuan Young hated Han Sui for framing him, and after being released from prison, he finally took revenge by killing the musician. Even if that revenge was understandable, Lam insists that Yuan Young would still have to face the law. He also warns him that Zoe is not Ava and that he must stop approaching her. Suddenly, a fight breaks out between them inside the gondola. After knocking Lam down, Yuan Young notices that police officers are already waiting to capture him. In a desperate move, he jumps out toward a nearby tree and manages to escape. The officers fail to catch him, which leaves the commander furious at his team. Angel, however, cannot stop thinking about something strange. If Yuan Young truly is a killer, why did he only knock her unconscious the night before instead of killing her? Not long after, the police receive a report that Yuan Young's hideout has been discovered. The location turns out to be very close to Zoe's house. Inside the room, officers find dozens of photographs of Zoe. The discovery suggests that Yuan Young has become dangerously obsessed with her, likely because her face resembles Ava, the woman he loved 20 years earlier. The police also find hidden listening devices and a telescope aimed directly at Zoe's balcony. Meanwhile, Yuan Young has secretly entered Zoe's bedroom. As she sleeps, he gently touches her hair, strokes her hand, and lightly taps her cheek. But moments later, his emotions collapse. He sits beside the bed, overwhelmed and crying in silence. The next day, Lam visits Zoe's house again. Just like before, he finds Jenny mopping the exact same floor in the yard. This repeated action immediately makes Lam suspicious, so he decides to take a closer look at the balcony. It raises a troubling possibility. Maybe Han Sui actually died after falling from that balcony. After all, the forensic report already suggested that he did not die in the ocean, but somewhere else. The investigators then scan the ground in the yard and discover something important. There are traces of blood on the floor. Jenny is questioned about it since it looks like someone tried to wash away evidence of a crime. However, Jenny insists she knows nothing about it. She claims she was inside the house the whole time. During the interrogation, the pressure overwhelms her and she suddenly faints. Lamb begins to form a theory. He suspects the women in the house might be involved, but there is still a problem. It would be nearly impossible for them to move a body all the way to the cliffs through forests and rocky paths where vehicles cannot pass. The only person capable of doing that would be Yuan Jung. If he had been watching the house with his telescope, he could have seen Han Sui fall from the balcony and then taken the body away. Yet something still does not add up. If Jenny and Zoe were truly responsible, why does all the evidence keep pointing toward Yuan Jung alone, as if he is deliberately taking the blame? That leads Lamb to wonder who Yuan Jung might be protecting. Is it Jenny or is it Zoe? Meanwhile, Angel discovers something disturbing while searching through Han Sui's safety deposit box. Inside, she finds a collection of photographs showing Eva while she was asleep, and the images are clearly inappropriate. The discovery raises a chilling question. Why would Han Sui keep such photos of his own daughter if he were truly a normal father? Jenny is questioned again, and this time she insists that her husband took his own life by jumping from the balcony. She explains that no one in the house would ever dare challenge him. According to her, Han Sui loved Eva very deeply. At first she believed it was simply a father's love, but over time it began to feel like something very different. Jenny then reveals what happened 20 years ago. Back then, Eva had a boyfriend. When Han Sui found out, he became furious. He locked Eva inside the house and forbade her from going anywhere. Later, Eva told Jenny that she was pregnant with her boyfriend's child. Even so, Jenny did not help her escape because she was too afraid to go against her husband. Eventually, Eva secretly gave birth to a baby girl, who was Zoe. Then one night, something terrible happened. Jenny never imagined her husband would go so far as to kill Eva. After Eva's death, Jenny became the one who raised Zoe. When Zoe was still young, Han Sui treated her normally. But as she grew older, her face began to resemble Eva more and more. From that moment on, Han Sui started seeing Zoe as if she were Eva herself. On the night of the incident, Han Sui was heavily drunk. Consumed by jealousy, he began beating Zoe. This time, Jenny tried to step in and help her, but the door had been locked. Han Sui continued shouting and accusing Zoe of betraying his love, while calling her by Eva's name. Zoe could only cry, completely confused by what her father was saying. When Jenny finally managed to get inside the room, she saw that her husband had already fallen from the balcony. Neither of them dared to look down immediately. When they finally checked, his body was gone, leaving only traces of blood behind. Lamb asked whether Zoe pushed her father, but Jenny firmly denies it and insists that Han Sui fell on his own. However, the truth is different. Later, Zoe privately confesses to Wei Li that she was the one who pushed her father. In that moment, it becomes clear that Jenny lied to Lamb to protect Zoe, hoping to make up for the guilt she carried for failing to save Eva 20 years earlier. Not long after that, Zoe is suddenly kidnapped by Yuan Jung. The police quickly begin searching for her, and by reviewing CCTV footage, they manage to locate where she was taken. Meanwhile, Yuan Jung has already subdued the security guards inside a building. He ties them up, takes their guns, and then places Eva's old locket beside Zoe, who is lying there unconscious. Not long after, the police arrive at the building and discover the security guards already unconscious and handcuffed. Suddenly, gunshots ring out as Yuan Jung fires at them, triggering a tense chase across the rooftop of the office building. Eventually, Yuan Jung reaches the edge and finally stops. He gives up and signals for the officers to hold their positions. At that moment, Lam warns him not to harm Zoe, revealing something shocking. Zoe is actually the daughter of Eva and Yuan Jung. Lam tells him that both he and Eva were victims of the same tragedy. Lam then asks the question that has haunted the entire investigation. Who really killed Han Sui? Using hand gestures, Yuan Jung admits that he is the one responsible. Struggling to form words, he expresses how happy he is just to have held Zoe in his arms, the daughter he loves so deeply. Then with a calm smile, he suddenly chooses to end his own life, following Eva, the woman he loved more than anything. Zoe is later found safe and completely unharmed. Meanwhile, Yuan Jung dies with the label of murderer still attached to his name. Moments later, Lam receives a text message from Yuan Jung that finally reveals the full truth. In the message, Yuan Jung explains that he and Eva had been together since high school. When they were 19, Eva became pregnant with his child. When Han Sui discovered this, he became furious and locked Eva inside the house until she secretly gave birth. Yuan Jung could only sneak to the house at night to see Eva and their newborn daughter through the window. One night he planned to help them escape because he had already started a small business and believed he could take care of them. But before they could leave, Hansui discovered them talking. Consumed by jealousy, he believed Eva had betrayed his twisted love. In a fit of rage, Hansui killed her. Afterward, he staged the crime scene by tearing Ava's clothes and injuring her body, then called the police. He even opened the window deliberately so that when Yuan Young entered the house, he would appear to be the culprit. When Yuan Young finally arrived that night, he found the door strangely open. As he rushed inside searching for Eva, he discovered her lifeless body covered in blood. 20 years passed. After being released from prison, Yuan Young unexpectedly saw Zoe. Her face reminded him so much of Eva, her hair, her eyes, her lips. At that moment, he did not realize the truth, that the young woman he had been watching was actually the baby daughter he once saw through the window long ago. In the final part of the message, Yuan Young makes one last request. No matter who truly killed Hansui, he asked Lam to remember that Hansui's death was not meaningless. Eventually, the truth becomes clear. On the night of the incident, Zoe pushed Hansui while trying to defend herself from his violent attack. The fall from the balcony killed him instantly. Zoe and Jenny were too afraid to look down at first. When Jenny finally checked a few minutes later, the body was already gone because Yuan Young had taken it away. The next day, Zoe goes to the police station and confesses that she was the one who caused her father's fall. She asks the police to arrest her, but Lam refuses. Zoe insists that she does not want someone else taking the blame for her actions. She also reveals something else. One night while pretending to sleep, she once saw Yuan Young quietly enter her room. Instead of hurting her, he treated her with surprising gentleness. While pretending to remain asleep, Zoe asked who her real parents were. Yuan Young simply walked away without answering. For a long time, Zoe wonders who that mysterious man was. The one who protected her and was willing to take the blame for Hansui's death. In the end, Lam finally tells her the truth. The man who sacrificed everything for her was Yuan Young, and he was her real father. So the moral of the story is, if your family tree starts looking like a crime documentary, maybe stop hiding microphones and go to therapy.